The Florida Panthers take an absolute stranglehold on the Eastern Conference Final, and I think if you haven't been paying attention to them yet, we're about to on today's episode, and also break down what do you do with Mr. Bobrovsky headed into next year's fantasy draft. We want to talk a little bit about this Stars Golden Knights series, and of course, tee up Game 4 of this Eastern Conference Final. Big time bets as well. Thank you for joining us for Wednesday's episode. Let's tap in.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
One of the favorite sayings in hockey is saying taking a stranglehold on a series, and the Florida Panthers have done just that in Game 3 with a sound 1-0 performance against the Carolina Hurricanes. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. With Steele and I, we have a lot more Eastern Conference Final Game 3 reaction on today's episode. By the way, thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. And on today's episode, Steele, after we talk about that Game 3 reaction, we really have to dive into the fantasy side of things here because Mr. Bobrovsky is starting to turn heads. First career shutout in the NHL postseason for this man who has had an up and down year. We'll talk about that. We'll tee up Game 4. We also got to talk a little bit about Vegas and Dallas, and of course, head to our Wednesday bets. But I think, Steele, we need to, first of all, you and I have showed the credit to the Florida Panthers. We've done that. We've been here. We've talked about the Matthew Tkachuk angle, and I think now it's time to talk about their other biggest angle. Sergei Bobrovsky doing absolutely special things now, turning aside 32 of 32 shots in Game 3. What are you seeing from the Florida Panthers in general, but focused on Bobrovsky? We'll get to his fantasy value in a minute, but what are you seeing Game 3-wise from this Florida Panthers team?
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts right now what the Florida Panthers are doing. They were one of the worst defensive teams in the regular season, 21st in goals against in the regular season for the Florida Panthers. So to go from, putting up very, very often and very consistently abysmal defensive group efforts in the regular season to what we're seeing now in the playoffs, relentless pressure in the offensive zone, clogging up the neutral zone and giving the Carolina Hurricanes or giving their opponents no space and time to really skate and gain some speed. And then in the defensive zone, clogging up lanes, getting sticks in front of pucks, and really just doing all they can to get the puck out of the zone. And again, repeat and recycle that same game plan of just that relentless pressure. They're really buying in to this system that Paul Maurice has shown them. And again, Paul Maurice is just one of the best coaches in the NHL, and he's proving that right now with this Florida Panthers group. It seems to me that Paul Maurice has really figured out everything the Carolina Hurricanes are trying to do, and he's shutting it down immediately. They continue to try to get the puck up, use the boards to get the puck out of the defensive zone. They're shutting that down. That's what we saw in the first two games, in the overtime games, with the Matthew Tkachuk game winner, shutting down alongside the board. So Paul Maurice is just doing a fantastic job of getting all his players to buy into this system, and they're just executing the game plan flawlessly. And of course, we're going to get to Bobrovsky and what his fantasy value looks like in the near future for next season's fantasy draft. But I got to talk about him as well, because what we're seeing out of Bobrovsky is just out of this world. It's mind-boggling. We have never seen Sergei Bobrovsky play this type of hockey. This is the best hockey Bobrovsky has played in his entire hockey career, not just his NHL, but entire hockey career. So to see him, really blossom, showcase, and again, we go back to the contract, looking at his contract now, making it worthwhile. It's just flawless what we're seeing. Yeah, it's flawless what we're seeing from the Florida Panthers entire group.
10 mil, and rarely, I would say, Steele, in the NHL, especially in the salary cap era, does it work out that a contract at the time, like if we run the clock back a year and we talk about the worst contracts to be handed out, or the worst contracts currently running in the NHL. Sergei Bobrovsky at $10 million when he's struggling. He looks like he was doing the Peter Mrazek backstroke in there at a couple of points in this past season, actually, and the season before. He's had his struggles. And I don't know what it is about some of these Russian goaltenders. I don't know if it's because they've been through a meat grinder during their quote-unquote junior career playing amongst men in Russia. And I don't know that much about the background of Sergei Bobrovsky's career, but you can't help but feel that some of the stuff that he's gone through in his career, Steele, he's doing this at 34 years old. You know, some of the experience that he's gone through is playing into how good he has been this postseason. And look, we'll talk in a second about his fantasy value, but 935 save percentage, 2.15 goals against. And in terms of game 3 recap and takeaways, before we head on to everything else, the Carolina Hurricanes have dictated play and pace of play for a good chunk of this series. And I think that's maybe one of those things. And again, you know me when it comes to playoff superstition and just some of those things you can't really put a finger on. This happens in the postseason, right? You can't even almost explain how these Florida Panthers are getting it done, and a goalie stands on his head. These are the caveats that have to happen if you're going to win a Stanley Cup. And now look at this deal, because here, I'll throw, because the stats, it's not just us like throwing, I think this is, the eye test, blah, blah, blah. Carolina commands 73% of the shot attempts in game 3, 75% of the scoring chances, and almost 80% of expected goals at 5-on-5. So they were actually bringing it for a good chunk of game 3, good chunk of game 2. And once again, Bobrovsky, timely goal from Reinhart. This Florida Panthers team, Steele, I think we said it, right at the start of this series, why not throw a little bit of loot on them for the Stanley Cup? There's only 4 teams left. Oh my goodness, now this team is knocking on the doorstep, and I kind of just want to see them win. I want to see them win for fun. Like, why not?
Look, they definitely have a pretty good shot at winning the Stanley Cup after all we've seen. This is exactly what Florida did to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second round. They're quickly smothering, they're quickly smothering these superstars on their opponents' teams before they can get too hot and get the fire going. They strike early, they strike first, and then they hold on to that lead. So the Florida Panthers are executing this plan flawlessly right now in the postseason. Look, all postseason long, we bet against the Florida Panthers. I had Boston to win in round 1. I had Toronto to win in round 2. I have Carolina to win in round 3. It doesn't look so hot for them right now. I'm not saying they're out of it. Again, you need 4 wins to win a series, so they're not out quite yet. But it doesn't look great for them. I think at this point, I'm just done betting against the Florida Panthers. I think if they do get to the Stanley Cup Finals, you got to at least put a couple of bucks on the Panthers to win the Stanley Cup, and even Sergei Bobrovsky to win the Conn Smythe right now at plus 210. So
why not?
From now on, I think I'm going with the Florida Panthers. They're just proving everybody wrong.
Speaking of which, you and I have been, I don't know about you, but my bets have been hitting lately. We're going to get to the bets at the end of the episode. We're also going to talk about Vegas and Dallas very quickly. And, of course, tee up Game 4 of this Eastern Conference Final. But very lastly, Steele, Alexander Barkov gets hurt in that Game 3. And aside from the amazing quote from Panthers head coach Paul Maurice, which I want to read off, I don't know if you saw this one. When asked about Barkov's status, this is what Mr. Maurice had. Quote, he's at a bar mitzvah. His neighbor had a bar mitzvah, and he didn't want to disappoint the kids. Now, some of these things, Steele, I know this has nothing to do with hockey, right? It has nothing to do with what's on the ice. But some of these fun storylines, you mentioned Maurice, you mentioned his comeback, Bobrovsky, the underrated blue line core, the trade with Huberdeau, the front office moves. This team is starting to just feel like a team of destiny almost. And look, those the intangibles aren't always what matter. But Bobrovsky shines. Carolina dictates play, and it doesn't matter. Now you can't help but feel it's Florida's series to lose. Oh, wait, it's 3-0, so it is. But you're not going to lose when you ride with eBay Motors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And before we get to everything else on today's episode, you need to know about the championship team at eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts or accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, they can make sure that every part fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to my garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop at eBay Motors with over 102 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when all the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find a Locked On podcast of your favorite team in all 4 major sports leagues and the NCAA. Your team every single day. Flip, what an incredible postseason it has been so far. Finally, Eastern Conference, Western Conference Finals. Panthers up 3-0 in their series. Yep. Vegas Golden Knights, we are recording a little bit early again, so we are recording before Game 3. They are up 2-0 in that series right now, but who knows what it's like once this episode has been published. But continuing on the topic of the Florida Panthers and Sergei Bobrovsky, we talked about Matthew Tkachuk a little bit, what his future fantasy draft might be for the next few seasons. Is he a top 10 player? Where would he land if he is a top 10, which he probably is at this point? But Sergei Bobrovsky, a guy that has really been so inconsistent, not just fantasy-wise, but with his overall game throughout his entire career. Very inconsistent goalie, but always seems to kind of stick around, get a little streaky, and then kind of redeem some aspects of his game. For me, I don't know about you, but for me, this is a guy who I've had on my fantasy team for the last 4 or 5 years, it seems like, at least on one of my 4 or 5 fantasy league teams in a season. And he was on one of them last year, and I struggled with him. But really looking at the stats back now, not a great regular season, but what he's doing right now and what he's doing for the Florida Panthers this postseason, it's kind of a redeeming story for him fantasy-wise for next year.
100% Steele. And I think also, we're being critical of Bob because of that up and down season. And I think you nailed it on the head, because you are also a owner of Bobrovsky. So we want the absolute best out of him. And looking back 1 year, he led the NHL with 39 victories just a season before. He's got 2 Vezinas on his mantle. And look, at times, yes, he has been inconsistent. For the most part, though, Steele, he has been consistent in his career. 360 wins to 207 losses and a .915 save percentage. In my opinion, if he snags a cup in this run, he's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And I know that's a stretch. 2 Vezinas, a cup, and a couple of years being right at the top of the table in terms of also, he led the league in save percentage and goals against in 2017. Am I on here to talk about the conversation about Bobrovsky for the Hall of Fame? No. What you are teeing up very nicely is, what do you do with him next year fantasy-wise? This is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and we need to zero in on some of these goalies, because you know how much I get heated about goaltender talk, Steele, for the fantasy landscape. And let me hit you with this first. Keeper dynasty-wise, for me, in those deeper leagues, seeing the confidence from this Florida Panthers team that we've seen in the postseason, you can't be excited. You can't help but be excited for what they'll be able to do next season, right? Riding this confidence, riding Paul Maurice another full season. So what I'm trying to say is, there's also no one to challenge Bob in terms of the crease. He's still making $10 million. The Florida Brass wants to roll him out there as much as possible, maybe to a fault as a number 1. So for me, keeper dynasty-wise, he's an absolute keep. He's an absolute top option in terms of, if you're in a deeper league with many teams, it's going to be slim pickings. And I guess I'll throw it back over to you for when the next angle for this is, in those year-to-year leagues, where do you see him going in terms of draft rounds? Because that, I think, is probably the spiciest question with this goaltender.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors to take in as well. Again, I go back to the conversation we've had so many times with Michael Amato. You always want to stay away from
Yes.
drafting a goalie in the first 3 rounds. There's a lot of goalies that you can pick, and we've seen it many, many times this year. Linus Allmark, Jeremy Swayman, Vitek Vanacek, even guys that you can even get on the waiver wire. Phil Gustafson came out of nowhere. And really just blossomed this year. So Kochetkov as well, who's an up-and-comer for the Carolina Hurricanes. Many goalies that you can snag in the later rounds. And a guy like Bobrovsky, again, we're going to have so many conversations after the Stanley Cup Finals are over, at middle of June, even before the draft, we can start doing some of these top 20, top 15 breakdowns for all positions, goalies, defensemen, right wingers, all of that. But Sergei Bobrovsky, is he a top 20 fantasy goalie right now? He might be after this postseason performance he's on. He clearly might be, but it is a good question. But for me, again, you go back to, I do want to reiterate what I said. He is a very consistent goalie. In general, when we're talking about his hockey
in
career,
general, yes.
Fantasy wise, a little bit inconsistent over the last few years. But yeah, I think he's definitely a top 20 goalie where you actually start picking and drafting the first top 5 goalies in the fantasy draft is a good question as well. Again, we talked about it late, usually now after round 3. I think he's one of those guys that you can draft as a second goaltender. He doesn't have to be the first goaltender you draft. I think you can get him where, again, after the postseason he just had, I think people are still a little bit afraid of him in the regular season. I think he drops all the way to like the 13th or 14th round. That's what I got him at this year in my fantasy league. So maybe he stays at round 13. Maybe after the postseason we just saw, he jumps up to round 10, round 9.
Here's my thing, Steele, and it's a caveat that obviously we can't exactly bank on, but this is what I'm kind of thinking. I think he goes higher because I think of what that Atlantic division looks like. Leafs potentially in flux. Not saying they're bad, but we don't know. Boston, some big questions going into next season, right? After getting bounced in the first round. Some veteran players there. Do we know what's going on with Ottawa? Ownership, DeBrincat might leave. Otherwise, Detroit, it's in flux. I just think, yes, we know that the Atlantic division has improved over the last 2 seasons. We've talked at length about that. But all I'm saying is aside from obviously being wary of his up and down performance over the last year, seeing what Florida has in front of them, that's where I think I'd be a little bit more interested in taking him higher up the poll, because Florida looks like, why not be right back in there as a top 3 playoff team? But again, man, it's just a goaltending situation that, what do you do? Spencer Knight is up and down. Alex Lyon has looked good. Oh, man, I'm excited for next year's draft, but I would say he goes a little higher than the 13th or 14th round, in my opinion.
He probably will after the postseason performance we're seeing right now. If you can get him later in the draft, then I think you guys got one, HE double hockey stick goalie moving forward with Sergei Bobrovsky, Vezina Bob, the brick wall himself, just getting it done for the Florida Panthers. Again,
look, if he gets 2 Vezinas, a Conn Smythe, and a Stanley Cup steal, he's in the Hall, in my opinion. He's in the Hall. And also, career save percentage, .915, and almost 400 win. No, never mind. He's in the Hall of Fame. That's it.
Yeah, no question. If he gets a Stanley Cup, he's in the Hall of Fame. But real quick, if you have a $20, $30, $40, put it on Sergei Bobrovsky, Conn Smythe, plus 210 right now. He is the front runner.
Plus 210 Steele?
Plus 210, Sergei Bobrovsky. It is very juicy. If they are in the finals, man, he has to win.
No, like if you're one of those dedicated hockey bettors at plus 210, and this is what I've been sleeping on, Steele. Thank you for the heads up, by the way. That's why you tune and tap into this show. Plus 210. Oh my goodness. Why not? That's wide open. That deserves almost, if you're making some money right now, chuck a 50 piece on that, and you can send Steele the tip because you thank him later for that one.
Finder's fee over here, plus 210 for the Conn Smythe, Sergei Bobrovsky. What you should be checking out as well is Bird Dogs. This episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. They are the comfiest pair of pants or shorts you'll ever put on. Finally, I finally received the box over the weekend, and I tell you
Yes.
what, it's the comfiest pair of
Yes.
shorts. I have been interchanging with both of them every single day. I cannot get enough of the Bird Dogs and the free tumbler that was provided with the package as well. You'll look great and feel even better with Bird Dogs. I have felt so great this past week. They're built for comfort and for versatility. Bird Dogs gives you the freedom to wear the pants for any type of occasion, play some basketball, go out around the town with some friends, a meeting with your boss, or even on the golf course. They can be used for anything. And the built-in liners are a game changer, which is why I have another order again after the package I just got of some new gym shorts on the way later this week. Again, a huge variety of styles and clothing like khaki shorts, Oxford shorts, bathing suits, joggers, and khakis. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. The comfiest pair of shorts on the market right now. That is Bird Dogs. Can't get enough of Bird Dogs, Flip. Loving them so far. The comfiest pair of shorts. Can't get enough. I'm wearing them right now. I would stand
bet you
up,
are.
but I'm not.
Hey, you're ready
to
go. You're ready to go from the course to the clubhouse to the classroom to I don't know where, Steele, with those Bird Dogs, baby.
Perfect. It's just perfect. But what we also want to get to is big time bets, where the money is made. We have a Western Conference Finals to talk about as well and tee up a little bit. Game 3, Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars taking.
Don't forget teeing up
Dallas.
Eastern Conference Final Game 4 as well, Steele. It's a jam-packed episode.
Jam-packed episode. But Flip, absolutely incredible what Vegas is doing right now. Again, we've talked about the goalie carousel. We are going to get to big time bets, but I know you wanted to talk about this Western Conference Finals a little bit before we get there.
I do, Steele. And, you and I are going to do a lot of these. Where do you take this player next season after a really good postseason? We're going to break down. We're going to do fantasy grades. Steele and I have guests coming up. We'll be teeing up every single position that you want to draft from. So make sure you keep it tuned and tapped into the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. That's number one. Number two, Steele, one of those players that I think we're going to have to talk about what you do with them next season is Chandler Stevenson, because I think he's once again proven effective at almost the most critical times for this Vegas Golden Knights team. And again, I was wrong about what this Golden Knights team ceiling was, and that's okay. But here they are again. We're a little early. The game's going on now. We don't know. Dallas may have drawn their first blood in the season of the series. It could be Vegas with the stranglehold on the series. I think what I wanted to just start with was Chandler Stevenson. 7 goals, 6 assists for 13 points this postseason. He also plays with a bit of edge at times. I think he's one of those guys that, because of his limited track record and fantasy success, Steele, we're going to have to be very careful with where you draft him next season. That was just the one thing I wanted to say with Stevenson. But overall, I think headed into this series, my bias aside, because I've continued to bet against the Vegas Golden Knights, you got to just show this team some credit. You mentioned the goalie carousel, Adin Hill, like holy crow, Steele. As much as on the one side with the Florida Panthers, right, you're seeing amazing, good stories from Lyon bringing them there to Bobrovsky bouncing back to, Montour's logging almost 27 minutes a night. I think the same can be said for the Vegas Golden Knights. Lots of really cool, good stories. And starting in the net, Adin Hill, .938 save percentage this postseason, 5-1. We might also have to have a little episode on what to do with Adin Hill next season, Steele, because clearly the door is wide open in Vegas. But hit me with your take on what's going on, because I think also the Dallas Stars need to have what they've had going, that secondary scoring, step up, because Seguin, Ben, these guys have gone quiet over the last couple.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are shocked to see the Vegas Golden Knights here in this stage. Like, for many people, like you and I, when we did our preseason predictions, we had them missing the Stanley Cup playoffs for the second time in the second consecutive year. Like, they missed the playoffs the first time in their short history last year. And then you look at everything that was going on. Robin Leonard was already out for the rest before the season even started, he was already deemed unplayable for the 2022-2023 season. So they were without Robin Leonard. They acquired Jack Eichel, who has a very serious surgery on it, that takes an incredible rehab and, surgery on his neck. And he has to go through a very extensive and very demanding rehab session to get fully healthy again. Mark Stone has multiple back surgeries. You don't know where this team is going to be. We both thought they were going to miss the playoffs. So it's just incredible that they went through all of that to get now up 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals. And it goes to show you some of those guys, Chandler Stevenson, Riley Smith, William Karlsson, the guys that we talked about, Marchessault all season long, really providing in the postseason. So definitely some fantasy values will be going up for next year's fantasy season.
And, Jake Ottinger was better in game 2. Can he do the same thing in game 3? And again, I can't not come on this show and talk about where they are in this postseason. They also had a rookie goalie lead them for 37 games in Logan Thompson, a career backup in Adin Hill, who's played his career with the Sharks and the Coyotes, plays 27 games for them. Laurent Boissat, a career backup, plays the rest. And then they bring in a cast-off by John Quick. And if you actually check the numbers, John Quick came in and won them 5 games out of 9 starts, which I think Steele also played in critically to them being able to maintain that top spot. So, like I said, all those things adding up for the Florida Panthers, fairy tale. Not much as a fairy tale for this Vegas team who have grinded it out, right? They've been at the top. It's not a fairy tale. Throw some respect on this team's name from the jump. But again, right, all these things adding up. So that's all I have to say about that. Let's head into the Eastern Conference Game 4 very quickly. Let's just include the tee up with our bets because same. Where are you headed for this Game 4? Because I don't know if you're going to agree with my lock of the night, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting storyline heading into Game 4. You just hope, and you really do hope the Carolina Hurricanes pull off at least one win.
Do you?
I don't. I hope they do. I really thought this was going to go 7 games. Look, either way, it's a great storyline. The Hurricanes continue to put pressure back on the Florida Panthers and continue the Eastern Conference Series, or the Florida Panthers sweep one of the top teams in the NHL alongside with the Miami Heat potentially sweeping the Boston Celtics. It's a crazy storyline, but I'm staying away from the money line. After very hard consideration, I'm staying away from the money line. I don't know who's going to win this game, but I want a little bit of a different route here, and I hope you're here for some of these takes. I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just rattle off all 3 of my picks.
I would prefer it.
First pick of the night. I'm taking the Hurricanes to get to 5 shots first in the game at -102.
Ooh, FanDuel special.
Every single game so far, the Hurricanes come out in a flash. They put, again, quantity over quality. They put pucks on net. They don't care where they shoot from. They've been first to 5 shots on net every single game so far in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's -102, my first pick. Panthers Hurricanes under 4.5. at +230 right now.
Ooh.
I'm going the under 4.5.
I like it.
This is going to be another 2-1, 3-1 type of game. I think it's going to overtime again, so I think it's going to be a 2-1 game. But that's my second pick, under 4.5 at +230. And my lock of the night, Matthew Tkachuk, anytime assist. I know he's got some game winner goals, but he's getting it done in the offensive zone right now. I expect him to get it done again on the power play. He can really just find anybody. It doesn't matter who, whether it's Sam Reinhart in the slot, Sam Bennett in front of the net, or Brandon Montour on the point. He finds his teammates, and they're able to get the puck in the net as well. So that's my lock of the night. Tkachuk, anytime assist.
I love that, Steele, because I think there's going to be a very big night for Matthew Tkachuk. These Tkachuks rise to the occasion. Their dad did it. And in all the best ways.
Yeah.
We need to start paying attention at both Tkachuk brothers because, honestly, if there's some way next season that you can manage to get both of those players on your team, and I know that's a stretch, You're a wrecking ball for that title run. You might as well start packing that money up. Tkachuk, anytime goal. My first pick, Steele. He rises to the occasion. There is a huge opportunity here for him to cement himself as one of the OGs in Florida hockey, and he's only been there for one season. And these kinds of things are important to both Tkachuk brothers, right?
Yeah.
They read the social medias, they listen to the headlines, they know he knows what's on the line here. There was no one that even counted them out I counted them in to get, I'd say, 2 wins against the Boston Bruins. And he's ready to jump to the microphones and jump to the social media accounts and hit them with those fire quotes of, now we're here in a Stanley Cup and no one counted us against the Bruins, Leafs, and against this team that in the Carolina Hurricanes, I think maybe of all of them, I gave them the least chance to beat. Anyway, Tkachuk, anytime goal. Odds are fluctuating on that one. Make sure you get the best odds before puck drop. My second favorite bet, you're at it at under 4.5 because you have some cojones. I'm okay with this at 5.5 at minus 125. The Carolina Hurricanes are a desperate bunch now, and I think you'll see a suffocating defensive and forward attack from their team. So give me the under 5.5. That feels like a safe one. In Steele, the confidence is just surging. And I think we got 2 side bets potentially on tap because I think Florida comes out like a house of fire and hits the 5 shots first. So maybe we do a 10 there and maybe a 10 on my lock of the night. Florida Panthers are going to get it done and punch their ticket to the Stanley Cup for the first time since 1996. A series in which they got swept away by Joe Sakic and the Colorado Avalanche. So a little nostalgia for you there on that one. Panthers minus 110 on the money line, Steele. I know you were staying away from it because that's probably smart. This Panthers team is ready to go. And after that demoralizing loss for the Hurricanes in game 3, it's going to be really tough to come out on the road here, Steele, and get it done. And now those injuries, the lack of scoring, it's catching up to them.
It's catching up to them indeed. And so is Sergei Bobrovsky just shutting down the door no matter what. I like a few of those picks, again, staying away from the money line. Before we wrap things up real quickly, though, something caught my attention there. Something clicked in my mind after you said if you could get the Tkachuk brothers in the same draft. If you're in a 10, 11-man league, team league.
Ooh, and you're the last pick?
No, if you're in a snake draft, you're like the 7th or 8th.
Snake draft.
7th or 8th pick. If you pick Matthew Tkachuk at number 8, and right when it
wheel around and take the other.
Take Brady Tkachuk right away.
Hey, baby.
I was saying that many, many times last year. Brady Tkachuk
I like that.
is a top second round draft pick in any fantasy league. So if you can somehow get the Tkachuk brothers, I think you're going to be very, very happy.
One, eh, Steele?
Very, very happy. Hey, I'm writing this down for next season. Don't worry. I'm keeping this locked for next year. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when you can find our episodes. And again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.